Hello world, welcome back to Cybercrete, and today in this video we are about to discuss all the important interview questions that are basically asked in any service-based company, either be it TCS, Cognizant, Infosys or Wipro or any of these. And today in this video we are going to have a look at each and every question that can be possibly made from this DBMS. So I can assure you, after watching this video you do not need to watch any other videos, and you have to pay close attention after watching this video, because each and everything that I am going to basically say in this video is super important. There is nothing useless in this video, so you cannot skip anything. So please make sure to watch this video to the very end, as you all guys have supported me that I have created that video of Cognizant test, and you all guys like, thanks brother. In test today I got all the 7 out of 7 questions that I basically created in this Automata Fix video. Each and every question have already came, so I can even guarantee you here, if you are going to be interviewed for this SQL, and there will be SQL round, like there have to be SQL question, like there is no way you can basically skip from it, because people generally ask this question. It's SQL and it is basically taught in BTech. So let's just start this video, and please make sure to have a look at each and every question. And if you like this video, please make sure to hit that like button and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. So let's start. So first question that basically arises is, what is database? Because you are about to learn database, so you must have little knowledge about the database. So if your interviewer asks what is database, then you can say that database is a way to organize data. Because, well, let me just finish this book's definition, then we will understand why it is so. So database is basically a way to organize data in the form of tables. So here tables is important, such that the access of the data is made easier and faster and also reliable and secure. So here these are the something that you can basically say that are the features of the databases, so that the access of the data is basically made simpler, faster, easier, reliable and secure. So now let us understand what does it basically want to tell, and why we actually need database at the very first place. So traditionally what we can do, we can basically create some files, like we have our CSV file, which is basically the comma separated file, where we can basically store everything inside text like C1, C2, C3 and things like that. But what problem does this file have? So this is a text file, and let's just say you want to search for something like, you can say, find all the columns that is having my age, where the people's age are less than 20 and greater than 30, means people whose range of age is 20 to 30. So for that you have to write a program that is basically going to search your CSV file line by line, and have to use an if condition to check if this follows this condition or not. So it is basically going to be a very heavy task, and you have to write long program for that. So the database helps us to get rid of this problem. In database, your data is basically stored in the form of tables, something like this, in the tabular form. If you have studied SQL, you might be familiar with it. And in this table we have all the values in it, and with the help of the database we can easily access the value, and even though our access is even faster in our database terms, because in the form of plain text file it is going to take lot of time. And what does this relevant and secure means? So let's just say you have a text file where you have saved all your entire databases, and one day by mistake you just pressed Control Shift Delete, and this file is permanently deleted. It is now nowhere in your system, so you cannot recover it. It is not reliable. But in database, what the database basically does, it basically creates its backups. If let's say one of your hard drive basically crashes, there is one backup sitting here, and if this also crashes, you have another backup sitting here. But of course you are going to ask, what if all the backups failed? So answer is obvious, you are left with nothing. But it happens so rarely that it is basically called reliable. And then also it is very secure. So you can see that your username, user password, anywhere on the Google or anything is basically stored in a database, and only the people that have right can access it. And in the case of CSV file, if you give the CSV file to anyone, he have the access to everything. But if you are going to give the database to someone, database is basically having password, so it is basically secure. Only the person that have the right access will basically access it. So now let us basically move to our next slide. There are multiple types of SQL command, and here are all of them. So it is basically a type. How you can basically remember that? So first thing that if you are going to create a database, we have to basically define it. So what we can basically say, the first is data definition language, which is basically DDL. And then after creating database, we have to basically create or enter values inside it. So we have to manipulate our database that we already created. Like we have created something, now we basically want to create, we want to input something or enter something inside it. So that is basically data manipulation language. So now let's say you have created your home, you have filled all the valuables, gold, jewelries, everything inside it. Now you have to basically control it. Like your child, he is not able to access all this thing, because if he have access to everything, he can basically steal it and sell it in the black market or anywhere. So you have to basically with the control. So then we have the data control language, which basically stands for, here you can see that it is basically DCL, data control language. And then we have transaction control language. Just think that you are making a Paytm, you are using Paytm and you are basically recharging or doing any sorts of transaction. So there your money is basically, as soon as you click pay, it does not automatically boom get paid. It takes some time, processing. So there this transaction control system comes into action. If you have basically completed the payment, then only then you are going to get the product. But if your transaction fails somehow, your money is already reverted back to your account in 1 to 2 days. So for that we have to use this transaction control language. Then sometime, very few often time, you can also neglect this data query language. It basically comes under data manipulation language. So data query language is basically like you have created everything, you have granted every particular action. Now it's come the time for the people to access the data. So you can give them this select command, which you might be familiar with if you have learned SQL, and if you have not, just do it. What have you been doing? So select is basically going to select each and everything that you basically need. So for data definition language, people often get confused how we are going to memorize each of them. So you can see that, just think, for creating databases, what all command we need. So data definition language, we have to basically create the database. So one command create is basically there. Then we have to basically drop the entire database, like this table is dropped, nothing is left inside that column. So that is basically the data definition language. And I will tell you an important fact in a while, just stay tuned for that. Then we have alter, like alter my home, create something different. I have been bored from this. So alter is also there. So you can take tell like 3 to 4 and it will be enough example for them to understand. And then we have the data manipulation language. So once you have created a database, what you do? You basically insert the data, you basically delete the data, you basically update the data. So for that we have our data manipulation language. Just think with logic, data manipulation language. We have to manipulate. It is already created, house is created, now we have to basically insert inside it. So it is insert. Then there is some value inside it, then we have to update. Then we might also have to delete if we have made some mistake. And here comes the most interesting question. And the question is the difference between this delete and this drop, because drop also deleted the entire table and delete also have the power to do the same. So here the difference is that data manipulation language are reversible, means if you have inserted some value, you can basically roll back and everything will be like, let me put into the simple word, in data manipulation language you can do Control Z, which is basically undo operation. Means if you have deleted something, you can press Control Z and well not Control Z, there are many processes for that, but you can basically revert back. But in data definition language, if you drop the table, boom, you are not able to come back. You have just dropped it, you have lost it, you have to create entire new. So this question is also oftenly asked, the difference between the drop and delete. Drop drops the entire database and you cannot basically roll back, or you cannot do anything to get the data back. Whereas in delete, if you delete the database, you have the function of the rollback, in which you can basically roll back and come, boom, you are fine, nothing is deleted. So you can, if you know that it is basically delete just by pressing the delete key, and drop is basically like pressing Control Shift Delete, deleting permanently. Then we have the data control language. So you have to take control of something. So either you can grant them access like, hey, take the action. And data control language comes into action like when you are sitting in the company, you enter the company, you are granted the access like okay, you are now my employee, you have all the access to do whatever you want. Of course not whatever, but you are given the access, so you are basically granted the access. And then when company decided, okay, you are not working fine, so you must be thrown out of the company, and that time they will just revoke your access and say tata bye bye, you are done. So in data control language, you can say how you can take control. Either you can give access or you can take access. So this is how you can access your brain. Sorry for whatever I said. But in transaction control language, there is something like control, commit, rollback. This is the rollback that I was talking about. Like if you made some mistake, then you can basically roll back. And one more important thing that you have to remember is that this transaction control language is just dependent on this data manipulation language. So when we are performing some data manipulation language and we have done something, then we basically use transaction control language. It cannot be used with data definition language, because rollback cannot be done on data definition language like drop, alter, or anything. So it works with the conjunction with data manipulation language. It is also one most important topic. If you mention it to the interviewer, he will be impressed. So it is perfectly fine. And data query language, it is just select star from table where blah 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 and everything like that. And then there is one more important topic that I would like to basically raise here, is that the difference between the keys. So let me just use whiteboard. So difference between keys, there are basically three keys. So let me just write all those keys here. Some of you who is basically from IT background or basically have studied it might know this. So this is basically first we have our primary key. So just pardon for my beautiful handwriting. Then we have basically our candidate key. And then we have our super key. So then we have our super key. So let's just use the reverse up arrow. So this is basically key will come here, key will come here. I'm doing reverse, that's stupid, but I do stupid thing. So what is the difference between primary key, candidate key, or super key? Or they can even ask what are the types of key that we have available in our database. So primary key is the master key, not the master, but let's say that it is a key with the help of which we can access each and every rows and columns in our database. So it should be something unique. Its definition is something like primary key is something that uniquely identifies each rows of our database. So it can basically uniquely identify who you are. So let's just say you are studying in college. Of course you are studying or you have studied in college. There you get your, I don't know, roll number. So roll number of each and every one of us is basically different. So there the roll number is basically our primary key. Then comes our candidate key. So in candidate key, what it happens, it can be the primary key. Of course it can be primary key, and it can also be the combination of two or more keys, like two or more things, or you can even say the sets of things that can basically uniquely identify your entire rows and columns. So let's just say you are studying in a college, and there, okay, your phone number may not be different, but okay, let's just say yes. So let's just say your marks, I'm talking about 12th mark. So let's just say your 12th mark, your 10th mark, and your name. So this thing combined can basically uniquely identify you, because there is like very slight chance that there will be someone who have the same percentage of mark as you in 12th, 10th, and he also have the same name. So this is basically going to be the unique case which won't even occur. So combinedly, this 12, 10, and this name can basically be said as candidate key. So here it is basically the sets of key that can basically uniquely identify your rows in your database. And then we have the super key. This is the master key. This is the biggest key, or this is the, you can basically add up all the columns, or you can take all the keys and you can basically say this, take all the keys, and this will basically uniquely identify everything because you are taking each and every keys there. So super key is the combination of candidate key, and it can also contain candidate key, it can also contain primary key. So very often we draw the diagram something like this. So here I'm writing P for short. P stands from primary key. Then we have our candidate key. Let's just write C. Then we have basically our super key. So here we have our super key. So super key is the master key. In super key, the sets of keys that can basically uniquely identify our database is called candidate key, and in primary key it is a single key that can basically uniquely identify our column. So if you can draw this diagram in front of your interview, he will be getting impressed. So try to draw the diagram, or you can basically explain with the clear example by clearly mentioning real world example that will make him understand that you understand, and he will understand and he will let you pass the interview or something like that. So let's just move on to the next topic. Okay, go out. We have seen the SQL commands. Now there is one more interesting thing, that is the difference between DBMS and RDBMS. Sorry. So DBMS and RDMS, this difference you have to just memorize 3 to 4 points from it. But let us just see, because till now what we have studied is RDBMS, not the DBMS. So DBMS store things as a file, like the problem that we saw. But if you tell those definitions, it will be perfectly fine. So DBMS basically store data as a file format, whereas relational database management, so here RDMS is basically the relational database management system. So it basically store the data in the form of tables that we have already seen. And here data elements needed to be accessed individually, as we have seen that if you have simple database of text file, you have to basically go through each and every columns if we basically want something to be accessed. So in that case, we have to basically go through each and every columns. But here in this, we can say that multiple data elements can be accessed at the same time, because it uses some sorts of programming language. Of course, you might have guessed it right, that's SQL. And then here you can say that no relationship between the data, and here the relationship is there. So here we have our relationship, and due to having relationship, yes, having relationship, it is basically called RDBMS, which is basically stands for Relational Database Management System. And here the normalization is present, and here the normalization is not present. So okay, I just messed up. So in DBMS we don't have the normalization, and normalization is something that we are going to see. But if you know about normalization, you can basically remember that we basically normalize our DBMS to create RDBMS. So if we have the DBMS and you normalize it, then it becomes RDBMS. So that is the case. And here DBMS does not support distributed database, as we have so told that you can basically store it in a single computer, whereas in RDBMS it creates multiple backups, store the things inside multiple sections, and thus it is reliable. And then here we have much difference. You can basically see here and read here. After all, you are basically going to memorize this, so there's no need to tell. So here it deals with a small quantity of data, like a small tech startup. No, a small tech startup will be too large. It can be just your personal information that you basically need to store, like your credit card information, your debit card, your PAN card. You store it inside the notebook, or you can basically also message it to your scene, Telegram group, or anything, anywhere you store, that is basically your DBMS. And whereas you create a database and you basically start storing something, you are working in a small startup, in big tech companies, big giants, there you are going to use this RDBMS. Then here data redundancy is commonly in this model, and here keys and index does not allow data redundancy. So if you don't know about data redundancy just means the duplication of data. Data redundancy, data is repeated one after another. That does not looks great. It takes and eats up lots and lots of spaces, and that is why we basically remove the data redundancy in RDBMS, so we can basically also store the space. And here you can see it is basically small, used in a small organization, that I am not going to repeat. You can basically memorize like 4 to 5 or 3 to 4 will also be fine, but you have to understand it, explain it in the way that I explain with the real world example, so you can basically, okay, I won't repeat it. Then there comes the important question of states of transaction. So state of transaction, which basically means that how any transaction is basically going to take place. So you have to use your little brain. As soon as you are going to click on the pay button on any website, either it's be Amazon, Paytm, Flipkart, anywhere or everywhere, you are activating the transaction. As soon as you click pay, the transaction is basically going to be activated. So let me just, okay, just go. So as soon as you click on activate, your transaction is basically activated, and then your computer start processing the data after getting activated. So it is partially committed. And what does this partially committed basically means? So partially committed basically means like you want to buy Alienware that basically costs 2 lakhs, and you have told your bank in partial committed state that I want 2 lakhs from you. You did not take out the money. You have just asked your bank, I want 2 lakhs from you. This is the partially committed state. And then your bank said, hey beggar, you don't have 2 lakhs, get lost. So from there, partially committed states, when the message arrived, it basically reached to failed state. So your transaction is basically failed because you don't have that much of money. But let's just say you are buying, let's just go with an iPhone, and you are purchasing like 10,000 phone, and you are in partially committed state where you asked your bank, I want to buy this phone and the price is 10,000, please give me 10,000 rupee. So your bank will process and check, do this guy even have 10,000 money? And he will check, of course this much amount is available. Then it will send the money. So here it is going to send the money wherever it is needed. So like it is, you are paying to Flipkart, then bank is basically sending money to your Flipkart. Then after the Flipkart received the money and told, yes, I have got the money, you have done perfectly well, I am going to ship you the order, then it basically comes to committed state. After Flipkart receiving the money means your transaction is complete. You have got what you wanted. You have purchased your my phone. So once this transaction is completed, then then it is basically in committed state, and then your transaction basically ends. But now let us understand this state, which is basically here, which is basically aborted. So either you are trying to purchase the product like Alienware, it is failed because you don't have the sufficient amount, then it is basically going back to you, and it will report aborted, means all the checks are failed, we cannot proceed with your transaction. This message is basically going to be delivered to you, and once it is delivered, your transaction is basically going to end. But now how to reach from active state to this failed state? To reach from active to failed, what happens here? You are trying to purchase a product and your internet is not so great. You clicked on purchase and internet said tata bye bye. Boom, neither your request, let's just say, okay, oh, why are you trying like this? You should not be doing like this. Oh my god, wait a sec. So let's just say here you are having your phone and here is the bank server. So here is the bank, here is your phone. You started processing your transaction, and here is basically the internet, ISP, internet service provider. It basically reached till here, and internet service provider told your data pack is over, you don't have any data left, so I'm not going to send this request to the bank. So in that case, you will get from here, it will be going to report it as failed, because bank don't even know what you want, how much you want, and anything. So when this active state reaches to failed state, this happens due to this condition. So if you are going to explain with this example to anyone, he will understand that you have the depth of understanding. But even though you don't have the depth of understanding, you can explain these definitions. Well, this definitions also says the same thing, like in active state, in this state the transaction is being executed, and this is the initial state of every transaction, like we have discussed, because this is the place where our transaction basically starts. Then there is failed state. A transaction is said to be in failed state if any of the checks made by the database recovery system fails. A transaction can no longer be proceeded further. So that's all technical term. You can also frame this in your own words and it will be perfectly fine. Then we have the aborted. If any of the checks fail and the transaction has reached to the failed state, then I don't want to read this rubbish, but you can just explain them in your own words, or you can explain them using drawing or using this simple example. So now let us move on to the next question. What is deadlock? So you might have studied, of course, if you are from CSIT, you must have known this deadlock. There are many memes around it. But if you are someone who is non-IT, let me explain you the deadlock. So deadlock is basically the state where two things require each other. Okay, let's see this meme that will make things more clear. So here you can say, you can release the lock first, so once I am finished, you may continue. And here this guy also say, you are going to release the lock, then I will let you continue. So it is basically like fighting of two peoples for something. So neither he is ready to give his thing to him, neither he is ready to give his thing to him. Like let's say he need 5 rupees, and he have the he need 5 rupees and he have the 5 rupees, and he needs 10 rupees and he have the 10 rupees, and he is saying give me the 5 rupees, then I will give you 10 rupees. Then he is saying no, first you give. He is saying no, first you give. If you remember the dialogue, nahi pehle tu de, nahi pehle tu de, in Hera Fairy, of course, then you might remember this. That was the condition of the deadlock. If you are in an interview, you can say, when your interviewer asks what is deadlock, you can basically say, if you are going to give me the job, I am going to explain you the deadlock. An interviewer will say, if you explain the deadlock, then I am going to give you the job. So this is also the condition of deadlock. Try it at your own risk. I won't be responsible if you give this example to anyone during interview, but you can give it if he is like-minded. But who is going to take risk? I won't. And here is basically the diagram that shows how this deadlock basically occurs. But there is also bookish definition that you can basically throw it at his face and he will remember. You can memorize thing. So deadlock is a situation when the sets of process are blocked because the process is holding each other's, like he is holding his and he is holding his, and neither he is going to give his thing to him and him thing to him. I think you understand. And this is how our deadlock occurs. And of course, if deadlock is going to occur in our database, then we are going to have many problems. And to help that no deadlock condition basically occurs inside our process, we can basically have two processes to detect and prevent deadlock from even happening. So let us see those methods. So at first we have our deadlock prevention. So deadlock prevention means we have to prevent deadlock from happening. So in this you can see that the deadlock prevention approach does not allow transaction to acquire the lock that is going to lead to deadlock. Of course, if you can understand from this, you won't be watching this video, but let me explain you. So in this what basically happens is that if I need something, here is me and I need, let's say, process A and process B, and here you are, you also need the process A and you also need the process B, and I took A and you took B, and now no, okay, let me correct, I took A and you also are asking to take A. So in that case I have came first, so only I will be allowed to take this. So I am going to take this B together with me and I am going to complete my job, and then and only then I will free this thing like A and B, and then you can basically use it so that deadlock state does not occur. So if I would have taken A, you would have taken B, then what will happen? Okay, let me just explain that example too. So let us just say here is me, I took A and you basically took B, and I will say first give me B, then I will give you and let me do my job, and then we can basically proceed further. But you will say no, first you give me A or else I am not going to give the B. So in that case deadlock is basically going to occur. So what we say that in this transaction we does not allow any transaction to acquire the lock. So we are not allowing them to acquire the lock. First of all, we are saying first of all, first come first serve, you are going to get this job done, then and only then this guy will be allowed to do that. So in deadlock prevention we basically prevent things like that, and there are many algorithms that helps this prevention to occur, but that is not much important. He is not going to just ask you, throw you each and every SQL question like that, so it will be fine. Then we basically have deadlock avoidance. So in deadlock avoidance we basically use the graph. So what happens here in deadlock avoidance, we basically try to avoid the deadlock, and we have some of the algorithms. If you have ever studied data structure and algorithm, you might have come across finding the circle or finding the loop in a graph if you have even studied the graph theory. And here the graph theory of like finding the circle or finding the loop inside it comes into the place. you basically try to plot your, let me just try to plot here, processes in the form of graph, like A requires B. Okay, let me use black color. A basically requires B and B requires C, but this C is asking for A. So you can see that there is clear circle in this graph. So we can basically use deadlock avoidance by using this type of technique, in which we can basically clear out, we can basically detect there is going to be a deadlock by seeing that there is loop inside our graph, and we can basically not allow that transaction event to occur. So it is like that. So we can basically remove it. Then we are basically going to see the difference between both of them. So because sometimes when you are trying to explain in such a way, if your interviewer does not understand, he may ask you the question, just tell me the difference between both of them. So here we are with the difference between both of them. So deadlock prevention, it blocks at least one of the non-condition necessary for the deadlock occurs, just as we have seen. So if there are two things waiting for the same thing, it is basically going to stop the second one from acquiring the lock. But here it ensures that it does not even go to that state, because it basically create the graph and check. So so it basically avoid that deadlock event to happen. Then here all resources are requested together, like you and me both are trying to get the resource together, but here in this case resources are requested together, and here resource requests are done according to the safe path, the path that we discussed according to the graph. If the graph is clear, then and only then you can basically access this. Then here we have our information required. So if does not require information about existing resource, because it does not care to create the graph, so it does not require any additional information. Whereas this in deadlock avoidance, so basically pay attention to avoidance, it requires the information about existing resource, available resource, and resource requested, because it has to create the graph. So how it is going to create the graph? Only and only when it basically knows what are available resources, what things it may require. So it's all that. Then here procedure and preemption. I'm a little bit tired, but let us continue. If you are enjoying this video, please make sure to like our video and basically subscribe to our channel. It will be a great help, and you are basically going to come to this video and going to tell that yes, I got this much question, or I get this question after seeing your video, and thanks for your help. Things like that you are going to say, I can assure you that. So let's just continue. So in procedure, it prevents deadlock by constructing resource request process and handling of the resources. Of course, the thing that I basically explained, like two boxes. First of all, check if there is deadlock going to happen or not, then it is basically going to prevent. But here it automatically considers the request and check if the system is in safe state or not. So how it checks if the system is in safe state or not? It just do by creating the graph. Create the graph, find the circle. If circle is happening, this means deadlock is going to occur, and just do not allow that. But here in preemption, sometimes preemption occur frequently, and in deadlock avoidance, no preemption occur. So what does preemption means? Preemption means taking something forcefully. You take something forcefully from someone, it is basically preemption. So here in this, preemption occurs like I told you, you are going to wait. I'm going to steal your item for me. So this is basically preemption, which basically occurs in the case of deadlock prevention. Do not forget this. I often interchange this thing, and interviewer tells that, okay, which side you are, either you are on data prevention side or you are in data avoidance side. So I have to make them clear. Don't do that mistake like I do. But in deadlock avoidance, there is no preemption. No one can forcefully take something from other people. So it is basically kind of good, whatever you have to say. But now let us move forward. Here comes the acid property. Of course, not the acid that is going to burn everything. You cannot basically say HCl, H2SO4 or anything like that. It is not the chemistry. So in acid property in DBMS, acid, each and every term define itself, and just you have to remember this. A stands for atomicity, and atomicity, if you remember atom is the smallest part, which is basically self-sufficient. Of course, it is going to chemistry, but it is not chemistry. So here the entire transaction should take place, or it should not even take place. So this is what our atomicity basically means. Either the transaction should happen completely, or it should not take place. Like if you are going to shoot someone, either you are going to shoot him to death or do not shoot him. I am being violent here, but that's the thing. Then we have our consistency. So here consistency is the important property of DBMS. So a database must be consistent and before and after the transaction, like we have seen that transaction control system. So it must be consistent. It must just report that if the transaction have occurred completely, if it have failed, and what regions were there. So it must be consistent. And here the isolation. Isolation basically means boom, you are isolated from everyone in this corona quarantine. Quarantine, yes. The isolation basically means quarantine. Like you are quarantined, I am quarantined, both are quarantined. No, I am not quarantined. Let's not use this example. So both of things means are happening parallelly. Like I cannot disturb you, you cannot disturb me. So let's just say there are two transactions going on. Let's just say it is basically transaction T1, it is basically transaction T2. This both are going to happen like this parallel, and this parallel line never meets. So lovely about them. So it basically cannot disturb each other. So here multiple transaction occurs independently without interference. So no people is going to interfere with each other, and that's the beauty of this isolation. Then there comes our durability. The changes after successful transaction occur even if the system failure occur. This also we have seen in our transaction control system. Like if it is failed, if we have our basically failed state, we have our aborted state. So here if even if the transaction is not successful, it have to basically tell that it should control the system failure. So in the case the transaction is failed, it should go in failed state, and it should go in aborted state, and every state like that. So that is the beauty of this ACID property, and that's what makes this database so powerful. Then comes the most interesting part that converts our database into RDBMS, or relational database management system. And each and every database that you are going to see is basically normalized. So let us see what this normalization basically means. So normalization is a technique which is basically used to remove the data, which is basically used to remove and reduce data redundancy by organizing the data into the multiple tables. Let us say that you are studying inside a class and you are having some subjects like okay, what subject should I choose? Let's just say I will go with math. So here I am basically learning math, and you are also learning math. So for let's just say we have to basically enter the records for each and every student. So here we can basically say that here is A who is studying math, then you will also come. Here is B, he is also reading math. Here is C, he is also reading math. So here we are basically duplicating this data over and over, and that is not good. So what we can do, we can basically just create a student table, and here the subject table. Let's just say here is the subject and here is the student. So here we can basically say have the student ID if you have basically the information about it. Student ID, let's say M for math, and here I am I. So here I can say I love math, B, just M. And here also you can score the teachers, and here also the head of the department of this faculty of this math. So here we are, if you have to do this here, like you can also write math, then you have to write T, then you have to use H. So here it will lead to data duplicacy, which we don't want. But we cannot remove data redundancy. So here also you are going to see that this math means this subject ID is going to be repeated each and everywhere where we have the math. But you can see that we have removed the data redundancy, because here instead of writing math and also the teacher name and also the head of the department, we just have to mention their teacher, and from here we can basically access, okay, math teacher, let's see who is the teacher here and who is the head of the department. So that is basically the normalization. Please remember to tell it reduce data redundancy. It does not remove data redundancy. It cannot be removed. Data have to be duplicated sometime or other. So here you can also see the bookish definition of data redundancy. Data redundancy is basically the repetition of blah, blah, blah. You can read it. I'm not going to read. And there are basically 4 parts to the data normalization, which is basically our 1NF, which is basically first normal form, second normal form, third normal form, BCNF. Don't confuse with BC normal form. Don't ever say that. Don't say BCNF. It will put a bad impression on him. Just say boycott normal form. No, okay, boycott normal form. This is it. BCNF. So now let us try to understand each and every one of them to have the better understanding, because you will be asked to explain if you ever open up your mouth. So here I wrote this in my own language, so here we can basically read it out. So in first normal form there are some conditions. So let me just draw a quick diagram to show you how all normal forms are basically interrelated. So if the table is in first normal form, so let's just say it is first normal form, here we have second normal form, here we have third normal form, here we have fourth normal form. So all the properties of first normal form is inherited by the second normal form, and all the properties of second normal form are inherited by the third normal form, and all the properties of the third normal form are basically encoded by fourth means boycott normal form. So you can also we basically say boycott normal form as 3.5 normal form. I don't know why they do that, but it is 3.5 normal form. So if you know the concept of object oriented programming, you must know that the inheritance. So in first normal form there are some properties. Like first normal form, we say that the database is in first normal form if each and every column of the data have the unique values. So let's just say our name is here and our subjects. So you cannot basically write here math, computer, and let's just say physics inside the same column. So everything should be differentiated into the different columns. That is why we have basically the tables. So in every column or in every particular row or column intersection, you must have the atomic value, you must have the single value. Then here you can see there should not be the multiple values, so there should not be any multiple values, and the single column name, and of course the name of each and every keys that you have. Like here you have name, you have subject, and here you have teacher. You cannot repeat subject, 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 subject. There should not be anything like that. The names of the keys should also not be repeated. So these are some of the formal definition of first normal form, and most of the database that you are looking for or you have is already in normal form, like 99.99% of the time. Then coming up to our second normal form. So for the table to be in the second normal form, it must inherit all the properties that we discussed of first normal form, as we have already discussed and told that the inheritance goes from up to down, multi-level inheritance. I am also covering OOPS, and yes, make sure to subscribe to our channel so that when I create the OOPS concept video, you are there to watch. So in second normal form, from the table to be in second normal form, it must follow all the property of first normal form, and along with that it should also ensure that there is no partial dependency. So what does this partial dependency mean? So partial dependency, basically here I also wrote the definition. So partial dependency, when the non-prime attribute starts, of course you are not going to understand like this. So let me just draw. Let's just say we have our A, B, of course my B is little C and D. And here we can say these are my A and B is deriving the D, but my B alone is deriving the C. So here AB can derive each and everything, but with AB we can derive C and D, but here B alone is deriving C. So this is the condition that is basically known as partial dependency, because here instead of depending on the entire candidate key, this key is basically depending on the part of the candidate key, which means it is basically depending on the partial candidate key, or you can basically use your own word, but you are understanding the meaning. So it is basically depending on just one, so it can even be derived from one. That is not good. So for the table to be in first normal form or second normal form, it just does not have this. So if your interviewer basically asked this question, you can basically try to draw this diagram and basically explain that if any of our candidate key, if like you have 2 or 3 candidates key together, and if just a single one of them is deriving other, then it is not in second normal form. And then basically coming up to the third normal form. So of course we know that to be in third normal form, it must follow all the properties of second normal form, and of course the first normal form too, because first inherited 2 and 2 already have the first property. So in third normal form, what basically happens for the table to be in third normal form, It must follow all the properties of 2NF, and along with that it should also ensure that there should not be any transitive dependency. And what is the book's definition of transitive dependency? So transitive dependency, when the non-prime attribute starts to derive other non-prime attribute. Means, let's just say here we have A, B, C and D, and A and B together are deriving C, and C started deriving D. So this is the case of non-prime. So C is basically the non-prime attribute. So what are the prime attributes? So prime attributes are the primary key which can derive each and everything. So but C is non-prime attribute, but it started deriving other non-prime attributes. That is not allowed. It is just like you are having interviewer. Two of the interviewer can basically select you. It is fine. Then you started selecting other students, like you started selecting your friends. That is not allowed. You are not the one to select other candidates. So that what happens in the third normal form. You can just give this example and he might be impressed or might not be. And in second normal form, you can basically say that two interviewers are going to select you. It was fine, but when your friend came, only one interviewer selected him and other did not told anything, but he was selected. So that's totally unfair. He just have to satisfy one and I have to satisfy two. That is not fair. So that what happened in second normal form. Then coming on to the boycott normal form, here the funda is very, very simple. It have to follow all the properties of the above normalization, and only the super key can derive anything. So here you don't have to even check anything. Like here, let's just say here if you have A, B, okay, my B is super, A, B and C, and A, B is basically deriving C, and here you also have the D, and C is also deriving D. Here you can basically check what are your prime attributes. So prime attributes are basically A and B, and let us say what things are deriving. So A and B is deriving C, and C is also deriving something. So we have to check, is AB a super key? Yes, it is. Is C a super key? No, it is not a super key. So the most simplest one is the most hardest name, boycott normal form. It basically checks if we basically have the super key or not. If the thing that is basically deriving something, the only condition that it must follow is that it must be a super key. So that is what is all about normalization, and I think that each and everything about normalization is basically clear. So let us move on to the next topic, which is also important. Oh, why you came? That is basically joints, and this is basically the last topic that we are going to study, and so you can relax. I can also relax for a bit. So but let us finish it. It is the last. So what is joint? A SQL joint statement is used to combine data, because you can see that we have the two tables, student and the subject. So they must be joined together, and then and only then we can access interchangeably. So that is where the join comes into action. It basically joins things on the basis of some similarities. So joins can only work when and only when there is some similarity between the tables. And then we have basically the types of joints, like we have the types of normalization. So here the types are basically natural joints to full joints. Natural joint, inner joint, left joint, right joint and full joint. So let me make one thing very clear, that left joint, right joint, full joint are basically the inner joint, and we are going to explain and learn each of them using a table that is going to make everything clear. You can also read this definition. So natural join, the resulting table must contain the attribute of both the table, blah, 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 blah. I did not read it, but you might have read it. So natural joins happen when, like, we have two tables, T1 and T2, and both of them have the similar key, like C1 is here too, C1 is also here. So it only happens when both the keys name are similar. So if you have two tables and having both like ID and ID, then you can apply natural join to join both of them. Then comes our inner joints. It selects all the table from table A and table B where the joint conditions are met. So inner joint, let me draw the most popular diagram. So inner joint is something like this. You have your table A, you have your table B. So inner joint basically joins this table and returns the intersection between these two. And left joint, so in left joint what happens, you can see it is basically left. So if it is left joint, it is basically going to consider each and everything from the left side of your table. So it is basically going to print each and everything that is inside your left thing, and the thing that is present in both A and B, but nothing from just B. But whereas in right joint, what happens if you have right joint, it is going to do the difference. So it is going to print each and everything that is inside your table B, and it is going to skip anything that is just present in your table A. So that is the difference. Then there comes the full joints. Full joint is nothing but boom boom and each and everything. It is going to show and display each and everything. So here you must have got the theoretical part, but many confusions might be running into your head. So let me clear them out in the next example. So let's delete it, click here. So let's just start by, let me just, which color should I choose? So let me go with green. So let us just say, what if I apply the natural joint? So if I apply natural joint, here you can see that our table C1 and C2 both, C1 and C1 are both having the same name. Let's just say it is table T1, it is basically the table T2. And if we join both of them, we are going to be greeted with result like 1, it will start from this 1, A, B, and here also 1 is present. And what are the elements here? X and Y. And then it will come 2, 2 is present here, 2, then 5 it will, and it will print everything from 2 CD, and here H and I, and 3 is not 5 is not present here, 6 is not present here. So it will just full joint will just do this task. Full joint, no, it is basically the natural joint that will do. So natural joint is basically when both of the table have the same name. Then let me just go back, and this was our natural joint. Now we are going to move forward to inner joint. So inner joint happens when it is basically same as the natural joint, but this can be used when, let us say that here we have the table with name C1, but inside table 1 we have table name C1, and here inside our table T2 the C1 name may be like O1. So let's just say everything name is O1, but you know that both of the things are referring to the same thing. You can basically take the example of student ID, and let's just say somewhere inside your table it will be just ID. So student ID and ID both are same, but they are referred in different tables with different name, and that is where the inner joint basically comes into place. So inner joint also do the same. It is basically also going to give the transaction. It is basically going to give the intersection of both the table. It is basically going to give all the elements that are present inside this table T1 and T2, which are present in both. Make sure about that. So which are basically present. If we apply inner joint between this both the table, we are going to get with 1 and 2 only. Each and every information about 1 and 2, A, B, X and Y, 2, C, D, H and I. So that is what will happen in the case of inner joint. And then let us move to our left joint. So what happens in the left joint? So left joint, as we have seen in the diagram, it prints each and everything from the left side. So what will happen in left joint? Let's say we are joining this both the table using left joint. So in left joint it is going to print 1, because 1 is present in the left. It is going to print the 2, it is going to check it, then it will print of 5, then it will print of 6, because it is going to consider each and everything that is present inside C1 and C2. And let us see how does it basically look. For 1 it can basically say A, B, X, Y. For 2 it can basically say C, D, and here we have H and I. For 5 it will say E and F. Now it will come here in table B and it will say where is 5. So it will say we don't have 5. So what it is going to do, it is going to print null and null. So you can basically say null null. Then for 6 also it is going to print G and H, and here it will be null and null. So this is what our left inner joint do. Left will consider the left side, and it is going to print each and everything from the left. If you print each and everything from the left and keep on joining whatever is available in the right, you will end up getting this. Then moving on to the next thing, which is right inner joint, what we can basically do, it is same as that. It will check from the right side 1, then what is the value of A and B and X and Y. Then it will check 2, okay, 2, okay, it is basically C, D, H and I. And then it is basically check 3. Is the 3 present? No, it is not present, but we are joining both of them on right joint. So this table T1 must be included first. So there's nothing here, so it will be null, null, and then we will have J and K. Then we will be printed with 4. 4 is also not here, so it will be null, null, L and M. So it is going to be something like this. Now finally coming on to the last topic of SQL in this too long video, which I am also exhausted making, is full joint. So full joint, as we know, it is each and everything that is present inside both of them. So what it is basically going to do, if you apply the full joint, it will print 1, 2, then it will print 5, it will print 6, then it will come here, what is left, 1 is done, 2 is done, 3 and 6, 4 are left, 3 and 4. So it will just print values like A, B, X, Y, 2, C, D, H and I. Sorry for bad handwriting, but let us just continue with this. You are understanding, I am just speaking for that. E, F, nothing, nothing means nothing will be printed as null. Nothing will not be printed as nothing, it will be printed null. You have to remember that. Then sixth, G and H. G, H, null, null. 3 and 4, null, null, J and K. Null, null, L and M. So this is what the full joint will return. So this was basically approximately 1 hour long video where we have discussed each and everything of SQL, and I can assure you, if you have completed this video successfully, congratulations. Now you are basically going to be able to tell each and every aspects of DBMS that they are basically going to ask. And I am also going to create a video on practical implementation of some of the SQL commands that is basically asked in this types of company. So please make sure to subscribe to our channel and please hit this video. This thought is paining because I have been speaking for about an hour. So please do that. Until then, I will meet you in the next video. Bye bye.